Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Boosted Rolls. This is something of a follow-up to our previous episode covering ConQuest, the recent tournament in Oslo in Norway, except this time we are covering the Invitational tournament and the Masters finals, along with maybe one or two other things. So, I should probably introduce the players that we have today. So again, I'm Simon and I play Legion.
I'm Tomasz and I play Circle.
And I'm Pat and I play Crucible Guard.
Hey! Pat, we already covered our sort of impressions of ConQuest in general on the previous episode, or the previous part of this episode, and so would love to hear your thoughts. So did you have any thoughts on sort of how it was to get there, or what about the venue, the organisation, or the city of Oslo, or anything you want to chat about or say? Now's the time, so go for it.
Sure. ConQuest is a really good event. This is my second year attending, and I really, really enjoy it. It was nice to see, in terms of attendance, the event was a little bit bigger than last year. A few more War Machine players were there, which was really great to see. I hope it gets bigger still. I know they're a little bit limited by space, and they might need to look at other venues if they do get much bigger, but really encouraging to see a good con grow year on year. I'd recommend the convention to every serious War Machine player. The Scandinavians are really, really good at War Machine, and in Oslo in particular, they have a really large meta with lots of very strong players. So one of the nice things about going to ConQuest is you can play games against anyone, and they tend to be really clean, really competitive, really fun. And this overall standard of play, I think, in Norway is extremely high. So really, really nice.
Definitely agree with some of that, especially regarding like what you just said about clean play. That definitely rang true. I've noticed in a lot of Scandinavian tournaments, I've been very impressed with the level of play and the cleanliness, as you say.
Yeah, really nice. And it's also cool because the meta is pretty big. You tend to see a bit of diversity in what people are playing, and you tend to see some unexpected things. So, for example, last year when I went to ConQuest, I got run over by Convergence that I hadn't really seen locally, and it's always nice. If you've got a wide meta full of good players, you get to experience quite a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And how were your impressions? Have you been to, so you've been to Norway once before for that tournament? Have you been to Norway any other time, or is that it?
That's it. So my only experience of Norway has been in the middle of winter in January. It's been cold. It's been dark. There's 5 hours of daylight a day. There's a lot of War Machine. That's basically my entire experience.
That sounds great. Sounds about perfect to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was a hell of a lot of War Machine. That was the other thing I was sort of, maybe we didn't mention last time, but I was impressed how much War Machine we managed to cram into those 3 days.
Yeah. They take it real seriously, right? And it's one of the few conventions where, like, especially, is it the Friday? You have the Masters tournament, which for their scheduling needs to be done in a day, but it's the biggest event, and it went on 6 rounds.
Yeah.
So we were playing in Masters from 8 in the morning until 1 in the morning.
Yeah.
That's a lot of game.
And to their credit, that game that carried on till 1 in the morning still had a room full of people just watching it, and sort of quite, even with alcohol, quite respectfully watching it. I would say I was quite impressed, really.
Yeah.
Speaking of that game we're discussing is the finals of the Masters tournament, which, as many of you can guess and many of you already know, was played between Pat and Tomasz at the end of that day. So when did the game actually start? Was it like 11 that it actually kicked off?
Yeah, I think it was about that, like 10:30 or 11. Certainly in that range. Yeah, because it was the second game after dinner, right? Yeah, it was about 10:30, 11, and it went on for probably a couple of hours because we played it through till our clock was pretty low on both sides. We had to set up and things. So yeah, around 10:30, I reckon. And yeah, it was really nice. Like you said, it was really cool that we had a lot of people in the room watching us. Although it was the small streaming room away from the main convention area, it was pretty packed, and it had quite a cool atmosphere, I thought, of a lot of people kind of whispering to each other and like trying hard not to intrude on our game while also kind of commentating on it and that kind of thing. So
and definitely intruding on the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like some classic attempts by the British team to whisper, but I've never heard someone whisper so loudly. It was brilliant.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Yeah, I was watching the game later on the stream and I couldn't believe how quiet it is, remembering how many people were there.
It was like 20 people. I think I sort of did a quick count at one point. I thought it was 20 people. Like at one point, me and Johan Deland, we were both watching from behind Pat, and we were Like we basically resorted to just opening a notepad on his phone, and then we just write to each other. That was the only way we could find to sort of not to be able to discuss the game without like just pissing off the players. So occasionally I'd just get a message passed over from him, like, has he feated yet, or is that model within 10, or blah, 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 or like, why hasn't he done this? And I was like, I don't know, I don't play Crucible Guard. What do you want? I don't know what half of his stuff does. So it was a great atmosphere. It was cool. So let's get into the game then. We're going to do at least 4 battle reports. Sort of one of them joint today. So let's get into them. For the Masters Invitational final, then, can you do a quick recap of your pairing, please, Pat?
Hold on. Are we talking about Masters or the Invitational?
What did I just say?
You
both?
said the Masters Invitational.
Brilliant work there. The thing is that I've got the notes written down, and Masters is written directly underneath Invitational, so I got them. So we are discussing the Masters finals.
Cool. So my pair for Masters was Silvestro and McKay. Silvestro in Magnum Opus, which is the infantry theme force, running a Vulcan, a Railless Interceptor, rocket men, Steelhead Halberdiers, and a bunch of other good stuff. Lots of solos, lots of transfers. And that's kind of my all-comers list that I play into most things, and I drop into matchups where I'm not super confident. And then my second list was McKay, which I had never played before, and I just put in there for fun. And that was also the list I ended up playing at the Invitational, but it was 2 Tauros, 3 Vanguards, a Railless Interceptor, and some support, backed up by McKay herself, obviously, as a battle engine.
Yeah. Okay, and Tomasz, I know you discussed yours in the previous episode, but maybe once again a quick recap of your pairing.
Yeah, so the first list was Iona in Devourer's Host, and it had 2 units of Ravagers with UAs, Bloodweavers, Breed and Call, Crockpot, and a lot of solos. Mm-hmm. In Battle Group, I had Stalker and a Feral. And the second list is Wormwood Bones of Ouroboros, with World Guardian, World Warden, Megalith, 3 Worldwirds, 2 units of Sentry Stones, 2 units of Shifting Stones, and Blacklat solos and some pigs for souls.
Mm-hmm. Pigs. Which pigs?
Bone Grinders.
Oh, yeah. I got it. Sorry, I was like, I thought you were talking about... Yeah, no, doesn't matter. Right. Okay, good. And so in the end, the matchup that was played was Wormwood into...
Silvestro.
Yay!
Dun, dun, dun.
I just assumed Wormwood because everyone's talking about Wormwood versus Crucible Guard. Plus, I did watch the game, so I suppose I did know. All right.
Yeah, and the scenario was spread the net.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah, of course it was, yeah. My favourite scenario.
Not at all bitter about this. No, I'm good.
To be fair, spread the net is fine for me, right? It was when I was playing Grimkin, I was always pretty sad to see, for example, Kruger 2 on spread the net. But with Crucible Guards, it's fine. Really, the scenario wasn't an important factor in the game. It was relevant, but I don't think it gave either of us a big advantage.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's get into it then. So turn 1, who won the roll-off and who chose to do what?
I think you, Patrick, won the roll.
Yeah, I did. My theme force gives me +1 to go first, so I chose to go first. The terrain wasn't so impactful that I felt like... Because sometimes against Wormwood, the terrain is super important, right? And if you have a nicely placed forest or something, it can be a big deal. But the terrain, the important pieces were fairly central and therefore symmetrical, and there was no big advantage to picking the board edge. Silvestro is awesome when he goes first because he gives his Railless and his Vulcan +2 speed, and they run 16 inches up the table. His infantry go a long way, and you suddenly have a huge amount of scenario pressure, which in spread the net is a big deal. Now, one of the things that keeps me honest, there's a couple of things that keep me honest, unfortunately. One is Stranglehold, which is a huge problem for both the Railless and the Vulcan because they cap out at armor 19. There's no way to stop them being targeted by spells. So they're huge models and huge points investments that are quite easily controlled. The other problem is Hellmouth, because all my models that aren't easily controlled by Stranglehold are high defense infantry that are really easy to kill with Hellmouth. And it's very hard for me to unpack my army in such a way where I can defend against all those different things, especially because, of course, Cassius is just so good at running wherever he wants. And essentially anything within 22 inches of Cassius is fair game. And I can't really go up the table and also stop myself getting Strangleheld or Hellmouthed. My plan for the game was basically, sure, half my army is terrible against Stranglehold. Half my army is terrible against Hellmouth. But he maybe can't put all of those spells everywhere every turn. So I just kind of have to overwhelm him with targets, hope some of them don't work out, and whatever doesn't get smashed by those spells can then do good damage.
Yep.
That was my kind of game plan. For that reason, I had the two huge bases on opposite sides of the table, so a single arc node couldn't stranglehold them both.
Makes sense.
I also prioritized killing the trees, the gallows groves, to also limit the number of arc nodes available in the early game, especially on the right-hand flank where I had my battle engine. I made it quite hard to stranglehold the battle engine in the second and third turn by killing the grove early. And so basically my game plan was advance forward aggressively, challenge scenario, try to limit what Wormwood can do, and then just get kills where I can and kill models where I can, because honestly, the only thing I'm scared about in that list is Wormwood and Cassius. Every other model I don't really care about and isn't that impactful. I don't really care what his army does. It's just, can Cassius and Wormwood single-handedly kill all my infantry and control my huge bases?
Two questions. One, you said that you don't have any way to prevent spells. Is that just in your list or in the faction?
It's in the entire faction. They've got no way of stopping a spell being targeted on a model. It's a pretty big gap for a limited faction. The best you can do is Eilish can make Wormwood take D3 damage when he strangleholds your model.
Not the best.
It's not really good enough.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you can do, of course, is you can purify and dispel spells once they're cast, but that doesn't help you against Stranglehold or Hellmouth.
Right. Okay. And the second question is, you mentioned battle engine on the right flank. Wasn't your Vulcan on the right flank, or was I...
Oh, sorry, I might be mixing the games up. You might be right. Yeah, I think in this I almost always run Vulcan on the left and the battle engine on the right. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is the Vulcan has a rocket that's only in his right arc. So if he's on the left, then most of the table is in his right arc.
Yeah.
And he can shoot the rocket really effectively. So my default approach is he's on the left. But I think the way the terrain was set up, this was like one game in 10, where the terrain was such that he was kind of forced into the right-hand side, and the rail list was on the left.
Gotcha. All right, cool. And Tomasz, what was your sort of thoughts and game plan going into that game?
So the first decision I had to make was to pick a side, and there was obstruction kind of in the middle, but more on one side. So I needed to decide whether or not I wanted to be in the way of Patrick's army, huge bases, or I wanted to protect my army from some angles. And I decided I wanted on my side. Then I had a practice game against Patrick. It was on ClockCon Steamroller, and we played the same matchup. And the Patrick's list was a bit different. There was a lot more heavies and none of huge bases. So in this game, I was having trouble to use Hellmouth because I needed much more strangleholds. So going into this game, I knew that there's less stranglehold I need to make, so I can use Hellmouth to effectively remove the infantry. So that was my plan. So because I was second, I could counter-deploy, and I deployed one Geomancer against one huge base. They were both on both flanks. So Warden went after the Vulcan, and Megalith went after the battle engine. And it was because Warden is a bit weaker, so I put Guardian as a pair to threaten the Vulcan and to provide Warden with the shield guard. And Megalith, being more bulky, went after the battle engine, and I figured he could handle the train alone and push it with his threat range.
Okay, and so how did that relate to that plan? Did that go as you thought it would, or were there some major changes? So I believe, first of all, Pat went first, and you ran up just out of, can you even run out of Stranglehold? You said it was 22 from Cassius?
Basically, no. Cassius is advanced deployed with an extra +2 inches for the theme force, right? And then he threats 22 inches. You can't reasonably play the game and be out of threat of Hellmouth. I don't think I did a very good job of protecting against Hellmouth throughout the whole game. One of the things that's tough in those kind of situations, and I know this from playing Haley too, which is as the caster with the control spell and the arc node, it's really easy to find the one place where your opponent screwed up.
Yes.
And as the person that has to position their whole army to defend against it, it's really hard with time pressure and other things in mind and other priorities. It's really hard to defend against every angle. I definitely could have done it better. I haven't had that much practice playing my Crucible Guard into Wormwood. The only other times I've played it were against Tomasz ConQuest, no, Clogclom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I definitely could have done it way better, but I gave you too many good Hellmouth angles throughout the game, and in particular, on turn 1, you got to take out something like 5 or 6 models with a Hellmouth, which was too much too soon.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that was the thing I was talking about. So my plan was to use Hellmouth this game, and I remember the ClogCon game when Patrick positioned the Rocketmans like really well, and I had issues with them. So in this game, turn 1, I saw a neat Hellmouth, and it required me to be without camp, actually, and I wanted to position my army in scenario as well, so it forced me to fit turn 1, but I decided it's worth it, because this Hellmouth was so good. Like, so many Rocketmans were dead, and it was from the Trancer. So the Trancer would explode, actually, if I knew it. So it would be even better. So yeah.
Oh, that was the transfer that we forgot. Right. Yeah. Okay. So so the game starts off. Pat runs up, kind of respects the threat ranges that you can respect, but you can't respect the arcing. Then you come up, you get a beauty of a Hellmouth, but you're forced to feat in order to make that happen. Is that an accurate summary so far?
Yeah, pretty much. Because if I use a Hellmouth bottom of 1 when I don't have the Fury from the Souls, it means that I cannot use Stranglehold. So the huge bases weren't Stranglehold. So I needed to protect my army with the feat.
Okay. So if I understand correctly, there was a happy Vulcan because he wasn't Stranglehold for 1 round.
Yeah.
Okay.
Living the dream.
And so what did the happy Vulcan do with his happy life for the 1 round that he wasn't Stranglehold?
I mean, not a lot. Those things were out of range, right? And
he went into a big-ass forest.
Yeah, he positioned in a way where he could contest my right-hand rectangular zone and score it every turn if Tomasz wasn't contesting it, because I expected him to get Stranglehold and not get to move so much. And I think he got Eyeless Sight and killed a Sentry Stone.
Yeah.
Which was fine.
Yeah, it's quite huge. Because the whole flank was... I put a Sentry Stone just to take care of the left flank, and I focused my whole army in the right flank. So I've made a mistake probably there. I should keep the Sentry Stone behind the forest. So the only threat for it would be ambushing Hatchak. But I put Sentry Stone in the forest, and I got killed by a Vulcan.
And what did you choose to do about Tomasz's rectangular zone? Did you sort of give it up, or did you manage to just throw a Rocketman in there, or what was the plan there?
Well, this was because I was going first on turn 2. There was no real point in contesting it, because anything that went in, he'd clear and score, and I didn't need to contest during my turn. So I had some Rocketmen positioned to contest in future turns, but I was just leaving it be for the time being. I basically on my left-hand flank, I had Rocketmen screening the railless, and they were in positions where they could basically clear my flag and possibly contest his zone.
Okay, so on the battle engine flank, you had like preparation for contesting, but no point in doing it now because, as you say, he's going to clear it. And on, shall we say, the Vulcan flank, you'd kill the Sentry Stone, but again, you're going to let him. You should let him have his flag, I presume.
Yes. Once again, I got Steelheads in a position where anything that goes on the flag can just get charged. And it's very hard for him to deal with all of the Steelheads, so that flank is feeling okay. And actually, throughout the game, I think that flank went pretty well for a long time, because the Steelheads were, once I'd taken out the Sentry Stone, the Steelheads were a real pain for you to deal with efficiently.
Yeah, that's true.
Fair enough. All right, so we go into the bottom of 2, and how do you deal with that situation, Tomasz?
So the first thing is always I need to stranglehold both huge bases. And about the scenario game, it's not very likely that I'm going to score any objective on the left side. So I focused to score a point in the middle zone, and I thought I'm able to clear it. I didn't need to do anything to score my zone because it's empty. Basically, I need to leave a war beast there. And so I focused to clear the middle zone. I needed to remove some steelheads that were in the way. So the biggest problem there was how to position my Waldwirds so I don't get charged next turn, and I didn't want to get greedy with them.
But you cleared and scored the circle zone, is that right?
Yeah, I've cleared and scored the circular zone, I believe. I scored my rectangular, and my flag wasn't very likely to score because of the hut check there.
Yeah, Hutchuk did a great job on that flank.
Okay. So you sort of managed to stave off that. Well, that was probably really important because I think if you scored 3 on one turn, it would put the pressure on real hard with double stranglehold. But scoring 2 is more manageable. So after that turn, and you're now sort of into your ability to score. How did you do? How did you manage? How much did you score, Pat?
I think my memory is a little bit hazy. I think I was able to clear my own zone and flag and contest everything. Did I even possibly get your flag that turn? Because essentially, your whole army is in the middle of the table because it's kind of surrounded Wormwood under feet, and you're very centralized, and I'm kind of flanking you on both sides.
Yeah.
And I did a pretty good job of putting on the pressure on your flag, and essentially cleared it off with halberdiers with solos. And I think on that turn, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think on that turn I scored both flags and my zone.
I think you did. No, because he repositioned Hutchuk onto it, didn't he?
No, there was a play I didn't understand. There was a rugman, but you moved him to contest the flag.
Yeah, I didn't score my flag because I was silly. Yeah.
So you did score his, but you didn't score yours.
That was people asked me about that afterwards. I suppose I'll mention it. That was just a brain fart on my part, where you had Megalith threatening the flag.
Yeah.
And I just eyeballed it and assumed he was in range without actually measuring it. And he was just out of range. And I should have just checked and then put Ragman to get a point.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. So therefore you scored your rectangle, his flag. So it's now 3-2 approximately. Is that about right?
Yeah, something like that. I don't think the scenario pressure was there.
No, it wasn't huge, was it? Okay.
Yeah, I think we are both prepared for a long game. I don't want to do any risky move to score 5 points in a turn or something like that. I just want to, contest the rectangular every time without losing like key piece and score 1 or 2 points a turn. That was my plan, and I think Patrick had the same plan, like score 1, 2, 3 maybe a turn. Right?
Yeah, and I think you're right, and I think that was a big mistake. I think that's the main reason why I lost this game, was it was a pretty bad matchup for me. And I played too conservatively, which just meant it kind of played out in a way that I think we more or less expected. And because I knew it was bad, I probably shouldn't have tried to play conservative and hope you made a mistake, or hope your strangleholds failed. Right? I should have probably tried to do something riskier. Like, for example, just put my Vulcan in the face of a heavy, knowing that it might die, but if it lives, I might win.
Yeah.
And giving myself a small chance of an out, even if it wasn't a great chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it makes you feel any better, I tried that in the team tournament and I got squashed like a bug. So it's the whole let's try something bold. It sounds good and it feels good when you try it, but when it goes wrong, it goes really wrong.
That's the thing that Johan asked me after the game. He said that I played it poorly and that I left a lot of stuff in Vulcan's range, that you could shoot my heavies and stuff. And I was I didn't care actually about it. I was afraid that Vulcan under Stranglehold, instead of shooting, will just move forward towards my army. And then I need to kill it. And if I don't, I'm kind of screwed, right? So that was my main issue. So if I can put some heavies in the range of Vulcan, they are probably not going to die from one round of shooting. You probably need more than that. So I was happy just leaving stuff there, feeding and taking all the shots, and also taking your clock to do so, and focus on clearing the stuff that can contest my zone and any zone actually, like the infantry, the rocketmen, the steelheads. Those were the important pieces.
Yeah. I think the reason I didn't go for that play, though, is I think realistically speaking, there's no way a Vulcan survives just running into your army. Your heavies were all close enough together that you're always going to be able to get 2 of them with strength buffs into the Vulcan. And Silvestro has no way to protect it, so it's just a big old punching bag at that point.
Yeah, Armor 19 is just not enough, is it? What were you, Tomasz, what were you contesting Patrick's rectangle zone with if your Sentry Stone died early?
So that was kind of an issue. I believe the first contesting piece was my Black Lad. I've sent them there to charge a Steelhead, and if I manage to kill a Steelhead, I would have a very neat spray with Battle Wizard, but I believe I've missed the Steelhead. And then I started moving my shifting stones to contest the flag and Patrick's zone. And I believe at some point I even thought about sending a heavy just to contest the zone, but I stopped at his before his melee range, because like if this heavy survives the shooting, then the heavy would kill the Vulcan. But if I leave the heavy in melee range of Vulcan, it's 100% dead. So I was like few millimeters from the rectangular zone, but I decided not to contest and give a point because there was no scenario pressure at any point of this game. So
I think I vaguely remember that when you were sort of like thinking about it and like, oh, do I go in? Yeah. And I think Pat's eyes lit up a bit like, yes. Come on in, my lovelies. Like, it was funny.
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of example of what I was saying, which is playing a conservative game and hoping you make a mistake. And yeah, had you gone in, you might have given me that window where I could have got back into the game, and you were definitely right not to.
Yeah, this was the heavy that has the best chance of killing Vulcan, because the other heavy is World Warden with power 18, with Curse of Shadows it's 20, but it's still Fury 3, so he's not going to one-round Vulcan. And Megalith was on the other flank at this point. There was no way I could put it on the other flank.
Okay. So, in the interest of time, Pat, do you want to give me a quick rundown? How did the rest of the game play out? How did it sort of finish up?
The way the game finished up is I did a good job of holding on, but over time, more and more infantry succumbed to patient and incrementally effective Worldbeards, killing like 1 or 2 a turn each, plus Hellmouths just capitalizing on whatever was the best Hellmouth target that turn. Sometimes there weren't good ones, sometimes there were, but and then all the while, Megalith and the Worldbeard are just strangle-holding the huge bases and laughing at them.
Yeah.
And basically, it comes down to a point where pretty much all my models that aren't huge bases are dead, and my huge bases can't do anything effective.
And the win condition was?
Misery. It was one of those ones where at that point I'm falling behind on scenario, and although we got basically to turn 7, I can't score more points than Tomasz, and I'm going to lose.
Yeah,
I concede.
You can't stop and check the other. All right. Yeah. And Tomasz, what do you think the best play was from either player during the whole game?
So from my part, I was quite happy with solving the issue with Patrick's rectangular zone. So I've sent the Worldbeard on the left flank just in control range of Wormwood, so I can run the next turn. And I've put some stuff in threat range of a Vulcan to distract him from this Worldbeard, which felt like is very important. And then the next turn I could run to the rectangular zone and to the trench. So Sylvester wasn't like a real threat because I was full on health, and the Vulcan would need to turn around. So because he was stranglehold, it would require 2 turns of shooting, and because I was in trench, it's not very likely that this Worldbeard is going to die anyway, so that was good.
Right. So that was the move that you think sort of secured the scenario win. I mean, obviously the stranglehold sort of gave it to you in the first place, but that has secured it. All right, cool.
And on Patrick's side, I really liked the Rocketman running, and then Sylvestra doing revive to contest my zone, because the Rocketman was outside of range to move into my zone, but the revived one was in.
Doesn't Revive have like a million constraints? Don't you have to?
It does. It has to be in command of the Rocketman UA. It has to be within 3 inches of a member of the Rocketman unit, and it has to be in Sylvestro's control zone.
Does it?
But I could do all of that stuff and still contest the zone.
Nice. Does it have to be within 3 inches of a member or of the leader?
A member.
Oh, wonderful.
You can also chain revives for that way. If the unit is quite clustered, you can revive one guy 3 inches away from it, then another guy 3 inches away from him, as long as they all stay in command.
Right, and as long as they're within control of Silvestro and all the other constraints that we just mentioned. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's quite nifty. I don't think I saw that. I think because that was probably on the left-hand side of the table, and I was looking at the right-hand side mainly from Pat's point of view.
Yeah.
So, cool. All right. Well, that's an interesting finals, and probably more interesting when we compare it later on to the Invitationals. So, speaking of which... did either of you make any big changes to your lists going into the Invitational? So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but there were 8 players in the Invitational, one of whom got very drunk and didn't arrive. So there were actually 7. And I think it was, oh God, I'm going to get this wrong now. There was 1 Trollblood, 1 Scorn, and 3 Circle, 4 Circle.
Yeah, it was my team from the team tournament and Asbjorn.
Yeah, so 4 Circle.
4 Circle.
And the Crucible Guard.
And a Crucible Guard. So we got 4 Circle, Crucible, Scorn, and Trolls. Cool. So you knew that in advance, and you were able to tweak your lists, and obviously you knew that there was a fair chance you'd meet each other at some point. So what changes did you make, if any? And we'll start with maybe Tomasz. What did you change?
Do you remember when I said that I was happy that alcohol in Norway is really expensive because I'm not going to drink it?
Yes.
So the Polish guy came to after the second day with Polish vodka that he brought from Poland. And we were drinking a lot. So for the Invitational, I came late and I needed to figure out the list. And I didn't have much time. So I remember that last time I spoke to Patrick on ClockCon, you said that your plan, basically, your tech into Wormwood was to hope that I will fail some strangleholds, and then you're going to win the game. So I figured out that I may just need more strangleholds. So I decided to drop a World Word, drop a Heavy, and drop my Arc Notes and put more Geomancers.
Fair enough. Okay. But you kept your Iona list were kept exactly the same.
Yeah, I didn't care about. I don't want to sound cocky, but we agreed with Pat that we are meeting in finals, and I'm a man of my word, so I didn't care about any other player. I just cared about Pat.
Well, that's very gentlemanly of you. That's wonderful approach. All right, and Pat, did you respond in kind?
So I definitely tweak my lists. The list of players who you mentioned in terms of factions wasn't what I teched for, because actually there were a few curveballs. So obviously, for the start, we didn't know that one of the players was going to get too drunk to turn up.
True.
When I was writing my list, that was not a consideration.
But we did know he was playing Legion.
We knew he was playing Legion, and also one was playing Legion as well for the event which he qualified for, and for Masters the day before. Yeah, he qualified through Masters.
He qualified through Masters, yeah. He came fourth, I think.
Yeah, and I played him in Masters. Did I? I think I played him in Masters the day before. Yeah, I definitely did. So going in, I knew there was 4 Circle, so I definitely needed a list for Circle. And then the other 3 was Scorn and Double Legion.
Yes.
So with such a narrow field from my point of view, I can make a list for Circle as long as my other list could just deal with Scorn and Legion.
Yes.
And for that reason, I didn't take Silvestro at all. Because Silvestro is an awesome generalist, but he just failed me into Circle. And I think I can do better for teching into the others than taking the generalist list. So he went on the chopping block and was replaced with Baldwin.
Okay.
And Baldwin is really great into Legion because he has all the guns in the world and he trivially kills their entire army in a round of shooting.
Don't remind me.
Like, for example, Crucible Guard infantry can just tear through Callus's army even with his feet. Like, if they're facing off against 10 rot rings, they mini-feet and kill all the rot rings and all the guys that he creates. It's just insane. Because they have boosted hit rolls, they're super accurate. And they just kill it all. And Baldwin has a couple of Grievous Rune sprays for dealing with the Chosen. He's got Rocket Men. Basically, that list is just awesome into Primal Terrors. And that seems to be the only thing that Legion are playing right now. So I knew that he could deal with Primal Terrors. And he's also great into Scorn, because the list that Ben was playing in particular were very heavy on battle engines. I think he had one list that had 3 battle engines, Winds of Death, with a Supreme Guardian and 2 Animantraxes.
Yeah, under Rasheth.
Yeah, and Baldwin's great into battle engines because he can Shadowbind 2 of them a turn with his gun, then they can't move.
Yep.
and he's good into Rasheth because most of his army is immune to a lot of Rasheth's tricks. Like, most of it is immune to corrosion. He's got deceleration to make him immune to a lot of the guns, and then he just holds the battle engines in place. So I knew that if I took him, he'd be really good into those matchups, and I just needed something to deal with Circle.
Yep.
And I knew Sylvester had failed me, so I was going to try McKay. McKay was, of course, the list that I had for Masters that I didn't try, and I'd never played before. But I knew, in theory, this list might be good enough into Wormwood, which was the only Circle thing that people were playing, that I thought was really strong into Crucible Guard. And it basically comes down to a similar thing, which is it's got too many targets, you can't reasonably stranglehold all of them. And therefore I get to play with some of my models, and maybe that's all I need to do to win.
Perfect.
So that was the theory going in.
So that was the theory, and let's see how it panned out. So, Invitational, round 1. Who were your opponents? Who did you draw? Tomasz, we'll start with you.
So, as I said, I got quite drunk and I was late for the Invitational. I was facing Magnus, so my teammate from Team Tournament, and he's playing Circle, Wormwood, and Baldur 1, I believe.
With a Storm Raptor or without?
No, without.
Okay. And what did you pick?
I picked Iona because she's very simple to play, and I had a hangover, basically, and I think she should do well in the mirror. And my opponent Magnus took Wormwood. I don't remember for what reason, but there was his other list. He said it was basically worse into Iona.
Okay.
So the scenario was Mirage, and I was playing 10 minutes down because I was late for the tournament, but Magnus, being a gentleman as he is, decided to reset my clock, so I had my full time. I want the role to go first, and because I went first, there was very little game for Magnus. I've sent my Lord of the Fist, crippled some aspects on heavies, then surrounded him with Ravagers. And the turn I went in, there was very little left on the table, and the line of engagement was very far from the middle. So I had a lot of space to score flags and zones.
It's only just occurred to me how sad Wormwood's feat is against Iona Tharn. That's just depressed. That, like, misery is an excellent description.
I mean, it's not as bad as you might think, because...
Really?
Yeah, because it does not block line of sight for Ravagers, but it blocks line of sight for everything else. And Iona plays an alpha style, so you want to get a lot from your alpha because your damage output drops a lot after it.
But like Wormwood's feat generally expects to maybe get 1 or 2 models getting through. Having 14 screaming Ravagers with corpses coming in, just...
it means you don't go in. You just wait another turn. Like, you cannot put Lord of the Fist anywhere. You cannot put Hunter's Mark or on anything. If he don't trigger Vengeance, it's probably just not worth to go in. You can just await the alpha, and Ravagers are very good contesting pieces. You can put one Ravager on each objective, and if opponent wants to score there, he needs to trigger Vengeance, and then he's dead next turn. So
yeah. Just a quick rules question. I almost never use the power attacks. Does throw trigger a Vengeance?
Yeah, so the model that is being thrown is taking damage from the model throwing it, and that will trigger Vengeance. But the models that are hit by the model being thrown will take collateral damage, and that won't trigger Vengeance.
Okay. Yep. So if you throw 1 unit of Ravagers into the other one, it'll trigger 1 Vengeance, but not the other.
Yep.
Cool. That will hopefully be useful for someone, because it was useful for me. So in the end, basically, he feated, you waited, then you feated, and he died.
Yes.
Right. Iona things. Pat, how was your round 1? Who was your opponent, and how did it go?
My opponent was Asbjorn, playing Circle, and he dropped Wormwood.
Hey.
Which was great, because I meant I got to try my list and find out the hard way whether or not it was good enough to make it into the finals, if it was a suitable challenger for Tomasz or not. So we played the matchup that I dojoed but never played, which was Wormwood into McKay. He was playing kind of the standard good all-comers Wormwood list, right? So pretty much the same one that Tomasz played in the Masters final the day before. Just a good mix of models and units that can deal with most situations. I won the role to go first, which is a huge deal with McKay, because her theme force gives her +2 deployment zone, and she has mobility, so she gives all her battle group +2 speed and Pathfinder, and everything just rockets up the table. She herself goes 11 inches forwards, and then threatens a massive distance with her gun. So she threatens into like the back of the board on turn 2. She goes first.
She can trample, can she?
1. No, she just moves 8 and repositions 3. Because she's affected by her own mobility as the caster, and she's base speed 6, and then she's got repo.
Lovely.
Yeah, so she can move 8, shoot 14, and repo 3 on turn 1. So she can even shoot into Wormwood's advanced deploy line on her first turn and go super far up. It's really cool.
Nice.
Yeah, and all of her warjacks can go a massive distance. The thing that actually limits them in that matchup, of course, is how much do I want to go into the threat range of the Wormwood list? Do I want to advance into range of the Warbeards? Do I want to go into range of Strangleholds from heavies? The answer to these things is probably no. So that keeps me about 18 inches away from the deployment zone. But that still means that he was in a situation where if he really wants to come forward at all, he has to feat or he's going to die.
Okay.
So that's basically what happened. I raced my army forwards on turn 1. In his turn, he basically can't target anything meaningful with attacks. I think he gets to Stranglehold a model or 2 maybe with Cassius, but nothing huge, and certainly no big damage to my army. So he decides to feat. And the thing that's tough about this is I've got so much board space and he's used his defensive feat. I've basically got 2 options. Either I just advance into his feat and kill his models. And this is pretty scary for Wormwood because Vanguards are speed 6 base. So with mobility, they move 8 and attack 2. So they have a 10-inch walking threat under Wormwood's feet.
Okay.
And Toros have a 9-inch walking threat. McKay herself has a 11-inch threat, just advancing 8 and seeing 3 inches into the forest. So Wormwood actually had to stay kind of far back, and his army, even under feet, can't get right in my face because it will just die. So that means even with his feet, he hasn't got a central position, and I can just walk backwards, and then he's kind of stuck with a big gap between us. There's this big no man's land. I've got a much higher threat range. There's not that much he can do.
Yeah.
And he told me after the game he thinks he played it poorly and he could have done some better moves. But basically the way it panned out is I was able to engineer an alpha on him. And I think in that alpha I killed something like 3 heavies and a light.
Okay.
And that basically crippled his army. I was basically walked away from his feet, then the next turn alphaed him and killed 60-70% of his force.
Right.
And at that point it was just game over.
Okay, so both of your round 1 games went somewhat similarly.
Yeah. I should mention, by the way, that game was recorded by War Room PL, so if anyone's interested to see it played, you can find it on their YouTube channel.
Perfect. And once again, the name of your opponent for people who are looking for that?
It was Asbjorn.
Asbjorn, so Pat against Asbjorn. Lovely. Round 2 then. So who do we know? Well, I suppose we'll get onto it. Who went through into round 2? Who are your opponents for the semi-finals, as it were? Tomasz, we'll start with you.
My opponent is Robin Anderson. So another of my teammates from the team tournament the day before. And he's playing Circle, and we have a mirror match. And I'm hungover. I'm saving my brain power for Patrick, so I play Iona, right?
And he had also Iona, you said mirror?
No, he had Baldur 1 with the Storm Raptor, so I was teasing Robin before the game that I have a Kruger in my pairing to scare his chicken, because Storm Raptor sounds like bad news for farms. And his second list was probably Wormwood, but in the Varus host.
Okay, so he had Wormwood Tharn and Baldur 1 Tharn.
Yes.
And in the end, he chose?
He chose Baldur. I chose Iona. The game is recorded, by the way, was recorded by War MPL, so you can watch it. And basically, the most important role of this game was who goes first, because his Baldur's Fit is pretty good. He can shut down my alpha, so he can deliver his alpha, and that would hurt a lot. Keeping in mind he has Storm Raptor, also with a Mist Speaker, so my Lord of the Fist would be really, really scared.
Okay.
So I want the roll to go first. It spread the net, and I run forward like really aggressively and managed to put my Lord of the Fist behind obstruction. So then in Robin's turn, he made a mistake in deployment. He didn't deploy any solo on the side of the flag, and he was a bit clamped up there with Ravagers, not have a lot of room to move. So he spent a lot of time just positioning his models not to lose a lot from Lord of the Fist, and just he focused on attrition. He focused just to stay safe from all my threat ranges. So at this point, I decided I'm going to play scenario game because he's really far back, really scared of my Lord of the Fist. So I realized that if I keep my Lord of the Fist in the middle of the table, at this point he might just die. So I put my Lord of the Fist behind to stay safe, so to have this pressure on him. Ambushed my Bloodweavers to keep him busy around his deployment zone, and run my stuff forward to threaten like every scenario piece, and put some Ravagers, so he needs to trigger Vengeance. I've put them in his rectangular zone. So in return, Robin had a really good Lord of the Fist run. He killed my Chieftain from one unit of Ravagers. He crippled the Spirit on Feral. He killed, I believe, Breed from Breed and Call pair, and probably something else. So because Robin was very busy to kill all the models I fitted him with, the scenario was quite open. I could go for 5 points in a turn, but later when we realized one Ravager is just half-inch outside of command range, I couldn't score the middle zone, so I went aggressively for 4 points in a turn and put really strong scenario pressure on Robin.
Oh.
So going to Robin's turn, he was still in this attrition mood. I mean, he was focused on attrition. So also he missed few key attacks, like my Knight, which was on his flag, and he missed her a few times. Then in his rectangular zone, Storm Raptor went in with the pulse, and even though he had very lucky rolls, like hard rolling 9s for damage and killing them under my feet, he still left a Ravager there. So when he passed the clock, I still had a white main on my flag, which was uncontested.
Okay.
So that won me the game. But then Robin realizes that he forgot to activate Breed. I let him move her. He runs her to contest my flag, but white main countercharges, kills Breed, and in my turn I just need to put white main back on the flag, and we shake hands.
Okay. So just to summarize from what I understood, basically you won the role to go first.
Yeah.
He then played too passively, or he respected Iona's threats. It depends on which way you want to interpret that. And then because of that, you were able to take a scenario game.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of two players that are focused on completely different thing. I was focused on a scenario which is actually a win condition, and Robin was focused on attrition, which is only a way to open up options to close the game. So because Robin was a bit too passive and a bit too focused on attrition, I was able to take this game even though the matchup was a bit too into his favor.
Fair. Okay. And Pat, your opponent in the second round was
Juan playing Trolls.
Okay. So he defeated Ben to get there, right?
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
There was a Troll versus Scorn game in round 1. The Trolls made it through. Obviously, I was not prepared for Trolls because I was writing with only Legion in mind. So his swap worked out pretty well for him in that regard. And I was left with an interesting choice about what list to drop. He had Orchid 2 in Storm of the North, and he had Colgrimmer in Band of Heroes.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and both lists were pretty solid. They had a good mix of beasts and strong infantry, as troll lists often do these days. And the reason this was a tough choice for me is in particular because of immunities and because of the Cloud Wall. So my McKay list, I think, is pretty good into Colgrimmer because it's not got too many guns, so her feat isn't that effective. The few guns I do have, I can give I can give McKay Eyeless Sight. She can shoot through the clouds, and then my battle engine can live on a flank and just shoot models that can't be protected by clouds so easily. So I'm not too worried about the Cloud Wall, and I think that matchup's pretty good for me. The problem is, the other list, Borka 2, is in Storm of the North, so it's immune to cold, and that means all of my battle engine 10-inch sprays don't work, and he's running a lot of infantry. So removing my 4 10-inch sprays as anti-infantry tools against a list with a lot of infantry seems really, really bad. It doesn't help that my other sprays are all fire damage, and his 2 units of Fire Eaters don't take a lot of damage from that either. So it was an awkward kind of list chicken where I thought McKay was good into Colgrimmer, but was really bad into Borka. And in the end, what I decided is McKay was worse into Borka than Baldwin was into Colgrimmer, because Baldwin had some anti-cloud tech and was good enough at shooting her army that even with the turn of reprieve from her feet, he could probably still get the job done. And I've played that matchup a few times, and that's what I found. So I dropped Baldwin, but luckily for me, in this list chicken situation, one dropped Borka. So I ended up with a matchup that was pretty favourable, where he was running a ton of infantry in the form of double Fire Eaters, double Raiders, double Bears, with a couple of heavies. And I've just got an impressively powerful gun line. I got to go first. I ran my army forwards and wide, just covering the table. He ran forwards and he didn't feat, which is probably fair enough. Like, his feat's going to be great whichever turn he uses it, and if he uses it too early, then I can just back away. So he just ran his army forwards, and then that turn, Baldwin killed pretty much every model in threat range, which was like both units of Raiders, both units of Fire Eaters, a unit of Bears.
Oh god,
everything,
that's just a sad drop.
The army just shot guns, right? He feated, the army shot guns, and basically Borka ended up with a couple of Bears on a flank with Valka and 2 heavies.
Okay.
Pretty much. And from there, he battled valiantly and dragged out the game for some time, but it was just constantly then falling downhill for him. Because we were playing on Spread the Net, he started to run out of models that could be in meaningful places, and his whole army basically had to go for spots that would start to contest, rather than going for the spots they really wanted to be to do damage, so it just got worse and worse. In the end, Borka himself was killed by Alice when he foolishly ignored her to charge a retaliator like Jack contesting his zone. He took a free strike from her, followed by a counter charge, which killed him.
What a fool.
The old 1-2 punch. Yeah.
How could he be so foolish as to put his caster in range of a counter charge? Right. So, what percentage of his army did he lose on the turn when you just gave him all guns blazing?
In terms of models, he probably lost 60%, maybe 70. In terms of points, he probably lost 40 because it was all the cheap stuff. Okay, but it cost him. Yeah. I think the reason it was worth using my feet on rather than saving it for the heavier targets was because we were on Spread the Net, and both our armies were really big and really wide, and I knew if I can just hose all this infantry off the table, scenario is going to become hard for him.
Fair.
With just a few high-value models. And that's exactly how it worked out.
Okay, fair. Yeah, if he can't, the Bears are usually his sort of contester from ambush or whatever, and if half of them died and the other ones were sort of stuck over on the other side with Valka, then it's, not so advantageous. Cool, so that brings you both to 2-0 and the inevitable Invitationals rematch, as per ClogCon. So, you had selected you tell me. Tomasz, I'm guessing, because I actually didn't see this game, I was playing against Ben on the other table, so I believe it ended up being Wormwood into McKay, is that right?
Yeah, Tomasz told us what list we were going to play, and so I obliged him.
Oh, right, I see. Well, that's again, very kind, just taking that.
Well, you look down at my sheet, my record sheet, and you saw in round 1, I had played against Circle and I dropped McKay, and you said, you drop McKay in round 1, so you'll drop her and I'll drop Wormwood. And I said, okay.
Yeah.
Saving a bit of time, just streamlining the event. Sfera will have been pleased that we kept the time management moving along.
I like
wonderful.
this kind of list selection, but at the same time, the hangover hit me really hard. I asked you, Simon, for the pill that you gave me before the Masters finals.
Don't talk about that. Yeah. So, you wanted the energy drink thing, yeah?
Yeah, but then I went for coffee, and when I approached the table, I was like, I'm not in the mood for any mind games, list chickens, or whatever. Like, let's just skip that. Take the obvious stuff. And then approaching the game, it was my first time playing McKay, and I didn't know anything about her. So I just wanted to ask only the most important questions, like not overload myself with details. Just what's your spell list, what's your feat, and think about the McKay in terms of her general game plan. So so I had I had a plan going into this game, and I can say already that it wasn't really good plan.
Okay. So obvious question. What was the plan?
My plan was because her feat was additional boosted damage rolls, so I wanted to bait an alpha with only the stuff that cannot kill my heavies. So I put 3 heavies in range of vanguards, because like if Patrick's decide to feat, this feat will be wasted because those vanguards are not going to kill my heavies, right? and if he don't feat, I will take a lot of table space, and then I can put stranglehold wherever I want, and like kill models one by one, and maybe control the game. Like, those were my thoughts.
Okay, and Pat, what were your thoughts going in?
So because I just played this game earlier today, I felt a bit more confident in it than I had in the first round. My plan was to try to repeat my success, which was just to be mindful of threat ranges early, to not let too many models be strangleheld, and then to leverage my very high melee threat ranges to limit how far Tomasz could go, force him to feat on turn 1, and then punish him later in the game by just rocketing in light or heavy jacks. One of the things McKay has going for her in the matchup is her feat is really ideally suited to killing the models in bones, because those models tend to be low defense, high armor, and her feat just boosts all the damage rolls. So I can send in a vanguard or 2 into a heavy and expect to kill it because of that massive damage amplification.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just because, I again, like I said, I never saw the table. What was the terrain like, please?
Not good.
not good, suggesting it was good for someone else.
There was no terrain that was meaningful except one obstruction around between middle circular zone and the rectangular zone. We are playing the pit too.
Yeah, so it was quite a slow scenario. It was quite open, the terrain. The big rock in the middle of the table was really important, right? Because it was one of those pieces that kind of splits the game into 2.
Yeah.
And forces you to commit models to one side or the other. And then whichever side you commit them on, they're a little bit segmented away from the rest of the table. But yeah, the rest of it was not especially impactful.
And did you end up splitting your battle engines, and by that I include McKay, or did you put them both on one side of the rock?
Yeah, I had McKay in the centre. She kind of has to be, just for her control area. It's not huge, and she needs to be able to project over to all her jacks. So she was in the centre, and then I put the railless on the far side of the rock because it was the only model that didn't need to be in her control area. So it could operate a bit further away from her.
Oh, okay. Focus 5?
6.
Okay. Fine, cool. So, who won the roll and who went first? And then tell us about the opening.
I won the roll, which I would recommend against Wormwood. Very effective strategy.
Okay.
I went full steam ahead, choo-choo, just staying out of the turn 1 threat range of trampling Wolds, shooting off strangleholds, and just staying out of world weirds. I knew I couldn't avoid Cassius, that was fine. So I stay out of threat range of everything else. and just run forward as aggressively as possible, threatening as much table space as possible, especially the center where Wormwood wants to live with his feet.
Fair. Tomasz, your response?
So I worked as planned. I left a few heavies in threat range of Vanguards, stay outside of Toros, didn't fit, and I left myself without transfer or with one transfer. Because with Wormwood, the thing with Wormwood, turn 1, I always have souls because of the piggies. And if my opponent decide to go for an assassination, it's usually very good for me because it's not easy to kill Wormwood, especially not top of 2. So if I bait assassination, that's good. So I wasn't worried about that, and I left my heavies in range of Vanguards because Vanguards are not going to kill my heavies, right, Patrick?
So Pat, just before we start with that, did you consider the assassination?
I did. One very important thing that Tomasz did was he strangleheld McKay. So obviously Cassius can pick one or two things to be strangleheld kind of regardless of where I put my models, and you chose McKay, which I think was a great choice. Had you not strangleheld McKay, the following turn would have been worse for you, and Wormwood probably would have died. So I think it was definitely the right move to make. Luckily for me, McKay, even strangleheld, is still pretty effective, because her gun's a fairly decent range, and she's got reposition, and on feet turn she has a running gun. So she can feet, shoot a lot of stuff, and then just get out of there, which is basically what happened. So I see that without the feet up, I can go for an alpha strike. It seems better than trying to stay back and then do a repeat of this turn, but with your feet up covering you, and maybe with a situation where you can start to score scenario as well.
Yeah.
So I think, right, I'm just going to go for it. This is kind of what my army is built for. And I see two options. Like you said, I could go for the assassination. I do the maths, and I realize I can basically get I can start off with McKay, which is very important because McKay has one gun in range of Wormwood, and it has flare. So she can get eyeless sight from Alice. She can shoot her flare gun, and that removes Wormwood's stealth. So from that point, the assassination is on. The problem is I can't get anything into melee with Wormwood. I can only shoot my guns. And that's basically a big gun from a railless and 3 assaulting vanguards, plus McKay's own big gun. They're all boosted, but working out the maths against armor 21, it's not great.
Boosted or additional die?
It's boosted, so I can't double boost with them. Yeah, if it was additional die, then that would probably be enough to swing it. I think on average I come up about 10 points short, which additional die would have overkilled. Yeah. But 10 points is enough that I'm not going to trust a variance. You know, it's like probably the odds are not very good. Had I had my Dragon's Breath rocket in range, that might have been enough to swing it in my favor, because McKay could have shot first. The Dragon's Breath rocket would have come up, done a couple of points, and reduced the armor. And then the Vanguards and the Battle Engine are all getting an extra 2 points of damage each. And that combined probably does about the 10 points discrepancy. But even then, it's pretty dicey, right?
Yeah.
Because if I'm working out that on average I kill into the box, that means half the time I don't. And McKay would have died in retribution.
Right.
So there was an assassination there, but it didn't seem great. And I thought, okay, these heavies are in threat range, so let's just go for that instead. Had the heavies been out of threat, maybe I would have gone for it. I don't know. But probably I'd have just been cautious and gone back. As it was, there were the 2 aggressive World Wardens, one on each flank. One was in threat range of a pair of Vanguards and McKay's gun, big gun. And the other was in threat range of a Vanguard, a railless interceptor, and the sprays from a suppressor. So McKay activates, she fires off her gun, doing a bit of damage, and rumbles forwards with reposition, just to be within 12 inches of both those heavies, so she can apply the feet damage on them. Oh. Because the feet affects enemy models in her control.
Right.
So that's why she was kind of danger close, is she had to get them within 12. If it had been a more traditional feat where it affects her own model, she could have been further back.
Yeah.
But that's why she was where she was. However, the good thing is, she's McKay, so she's armor 19 with 36 boxes, and she can tank a heavy. Just like, yeah, whatever. I'm in charge range of a heavy, who cares? So I knew I was going to be reasonably safe. I hadn't really worked it out. I just thought, the assassination's probably not on. if I sit here, I guess we'll find out one way or the other. So on my left flank, 2 Vanguards assault the heavy. Vanguards are awesome with her feet because they have 3 initial attacks. They have their polearm, their shield, and their assault shot, which all get boosted damage with her feet. And then they have enough focus left to buy 2 more polearm attacks. So each light is making 5 attacks, all with boosted damage rolls.
That's pretty tasty.
Yeah, so the pair of them actually quite easily tear down a wall because it has pretty bad defensive stats, right? It's like 10-18. So basically, all their attacks hit, and bam, 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 down goes the first wall. With a little bit of focus to spare, I think. I forget. But they do it quite efficiently. And are sitting engaging a bunch of mannequins, which isn't bad. It reduces the number of sprays that I'm going to take the next turn. And they're in relevant scenario positions, contesting the left-hand zone in the center. So that's great.
Okay.
On the right, it's a bit harder to kill the other walls. But luckily, the battle engine's in a spot where it can just about advance and see past a forest that Tomasz has placed to block line of sight. And getting all those extra sprays really helps. So it gets 2 spray 10s as well as its big gun. And that does, even though I roll quite poorly, it does some chip damage on the heavy. It's then helped by an advancing Vanguard, who is able to get his 1 reach attack plus buy 3 more attacks, all with boosted damage. Those also roll quite poorly, leaving it on a few boxes. But then we've got the suppressor as like Plan C, who is he's got dual attack. So the suppressor is really cool because it means he can trample and still spray. Because he only forfeits his melee attacks when he tramples. So he tramples forwards 8 inches and then is able to get 2 boosted fire damage sprays on the heavy, which takes it down. Then I've still got 2 Tauros left to activate, and although Tomasz has sensibly put no models in threat range, they just basically run forwards to block lines that might get to McKay. And actually, in hindsight, I don't do a perfect job of this. I could have done it better. But they're still in an okay position to make it hard to engage her.
Okay. But the Tauros are there sort of just covering, like, you realise you've done the damage, so now you just need to make sure you don't get counter-killed.
Yeah, and I feel pretty confident at this point because I've taken out 2 heavies, which is obviously great. And even though he has a couple of heavies left, I essentially have 5 warjacks who are all in relevant scenario positions and can all threaten retaliation. And what I'm expecting is I'll lose a couple, and then I'll start to tear down the remaining heavies.
And do the Vanguards perform even out of feet?
They don't do a huge amount of damage, but against the mediocre stats of the Bones army, they do some. And they themselves are really resilient. Right? They've got great defensive stats. They're 13-19 if you count their shields, plus set defense.
Right.
So they can definitely wear things down over time.
Okay. So, Tomasz, your hangover at this point is probably getting a lot worse.
I mean, at this point, everything was fine. Like, I'm looking at the table, I'm losing a heavy, I'm losing another one. From the lights, I wasn't expecting that I'm going to kill my heavy, so I'm like, that's fine.
I'm just seeing the meme in my head of the guy drinking the coffee in the fire. It's like, oh, it's fine, everything's fine. Okay.
Yeah, seriously, I wasn't even disappointed or anything. I was just looking like whatever. Yeah, I just lost a heavy unexpected. Oh, another heavy. Oh, everything is in my face. Yeah, that's fine. So I start my turn. I took a sip of coffee, look at the table. What can I do now? And I'm like, I probably have to go for an assassination. So I measure things out, and I have a walled warden after the teleport, which we later realized that he wasn't in stones, can get to McKay. But then I realized that McKay is in the water, and because there's a water, I need 2 Helmals because it's halving the distance of the push. So now I have 2 Tauros that can countercharge. If I forgot about them, they will screw my plan, right? So I probably need to phase jump a Blackclad between those 2 to ignore them for my assassination plan. So I measured some things out, and I realized that the only thing I can helm off from is my Blackclad. So I need to teleport him, and because there's a water, he needs to be so close to McKay that I'm either engaging her or I'm not presenting back because it's small base, I need to be somewhere where I can see him with the Cassius to do the Hellmouth. And then I'm running the math, and it's like the first Hellmouth needs a 7, so I need to boost it. It's still like, if I fail, I probably lose the game. And then I probably need to boost the damage on Blacklad to kill him, because he's going to block the second Hellmouth. And then I can do the second Hellmouth from McKay. So I was feeling kind of like that's too dicey. Like, and then I started running the math, and if I get a heavy on McKay, the heavy is still like killing her on just average dice, something like that. The heavy is mat 6, and Patrick told me that McKay is def 9. So I'm like,
she's def 10. I was corrected by a bystander, but yeah, pretty easy to hit regardless.
I mean, it was important for the decision, because when I've heard she's def 9, I was like, I'm probably going for it. I don't know. And then you told me she's def 10, and I'm like, no, now I need force.
I have never
def 9
ever
was
heard
on, but def 10 is just too high.
Def 10 putting anyone off. That is absolutely nuts.
Yeah, because
that's brilliant.
Because if I manage to get a chain attack, then I probably kill her, like most likely. But chain attack I need to hit both initials, so if I miss one, that's over. So I didn't like that assassination, and I didn't like there were so many things that need to go right, and I'm hangover, so it's probably easy for me to screw something up. So then I'm like, I have another assassination, which is Curse of Shadows, 4 Strangleholds, and 2 Old Words. And then I'm starting running the math, my head hurts, so I'm like, it's probably not killing the train. So I will just play the long game. And the thing is that most warcasters with offensive feat are really good on the alpha, but their offensive output drops after it. They usually don't have like damage buff or anything like that. And she's like focus 6. There was only one junior to give some focus. So I was like, I'm probably under the impression that I lost that game, but I may be not as bad situation as I may think. So in hindsight, I should go for the assassination. I run the math when the second assassination, the 2 Old Words and 4 Stranglehold. I ran the math when I went home, and it was like 80%er. So I was like, fuck.
Yeah,
that's sad.
Yeah, but like 2 Old Words killing a giant train, probably not. Yeah, I would need to run them after in the game, and I would go for it, but I didn't. She was camping nothing.
My experience with Old Words would tell me that 2 Old Words will kill a train, no problem. But like that's just my personal feelings about Old Words.
I would have probably like maybe a mannequin spray extra, or maybe 2, something like that. So it was like very good assassination, but I ignored it. I decided to play a long game. So at this point, my plan was to kill those Toros, maybe kill 3 heavies, and occupy the vanguards and kill them during the long game with mannequins and sprays, just doing cheap damage every turn and hoping that that's good enough. So I removed 2 Toros and I crippled an arm on suppressor. I was in danger zone with Wormwood and with all my heavies. So at this point, it was just the pit, like fighting in the middle and back and forth.
Okay.
I didn't score a point, and over to Pat.
Yeah, I want to take this moment to shout out a particular spell, Failsafe, that is really awesome on Jacks with shields, right? It's +2 armor and you can't be crippled. And that was one of the things that really limited the amount of damage that you could do into my heavies, right? And one of the reasons why the suppressor itself probably didn't die, because you had to put more effort into killing the Toro with Failsafe on it. And although Waldreards tried to chip in on it, that list has so many shield guards, because it's got 3 vanguards that each have 2 shield guards because of the theme benefit, that you can't get a lot of purgation shots into it, and it can actually just tank Walds quite effectively.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the things that I think kept me in it at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, and then over to my turn, I've lost my big hitters, And so it's time to grind. But of course, I've still got the biggest hitter of them all, which is McKay, who's a badass in combat because she's got ram on her melee attack. She's power strength 15, and she's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 initials, if you count all her guns, because she's got dual attack. So my basic plan is to soften up Megalith and the Wold Warden, who are in the middle of the table fighting back-to-back, having just trashed all my heavies, to soften them up, and then send in McKay last, so she can spend as little of her stack as possible, so she can be as safe as possible from assassination. Because my feeling is, once I kill those 2 heavies, the only way I can lose is through assassination. So I start off with the Suppressor, who with his good arm sprays them both with rust, and then does some damage to one of the heavies. I then move in my Battle Engine, who does a bunch of sprays, and I move in my Vanguards that do a bunch of damage. And between the rust and all the attacks, I basically put both heavies on very little damage. I might have even killed one at that point, but I do a ton of damage. McKay is then able to go in and kill them both without having to spend a single focus.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, she also picks up a lot of other stuff with her sprays. So while all this is going on, her and her Railless Interceptor on the flank are kind of incidentally killing things like Sentry Stones and Mannequins and Support Models and Shifting Stones just all over the place. And the Vanguards who haven't engaged the heavies, or some of them who are also engaging Woldweirds. So Woldweirds are tied up fighting Vanguards. McKay is in the middle on 6 camp. All of Tomasz's heavies are dead, and most of his support models are in pieces.
Okay, and that's and we're pretty clear from both sides that this is irreparable damage.
At least I think it is. Tomasz kept on going, and gave me pause for concern. But at this point, I'm feeling pretty confident.
All right, and how are you feeling about that? Did you sort of? I mean, obviously you played through, and as you should, but
yeah, it was very, very fun game. So I enjoyed it playing from my back foot. As far as I remember, I started the turn saying, "All right, it's time to kill your army with mannequins."
Yes. And then you proceeded. It was one of those situations which I always think is kind of funny in War Machine, where you're like, okay, now I just need to get really lucky. And then you do your models, and they all roll really badly. And the dice are just like, no, we're not letting you off the hook.
Yeah, so I could get on the back of the Vanguards with at least 1 or 2 mannequins. Then I could spray them, obviously. Yeah. I had enough fury to boost my rolls. And in order to make Muff better, I had Black Lats. So I wanted to do spray with Black Lats, and I figured out that I might get lucky and get a crit during the game and knock one of the Vanguards down, maybe 2, I don't know. And if I manage to do it, they will be easier to hit, and in retaliation, they are not as efficient because they need to stand up. And if they are knocked down, I can free my Woldweirds as well. I didn't get a single crit, and my mannequins were rolling dice of 7, and I was rolling 7s all the time. So I don't think that I do any work that turn. And yeah, Patrick scored. I contested everything, but at this point it was 1-0. I passed the clock to Pat. Yeah. Okay.
And did you clean up it? Like, how? You know, let's skip ahead. I think we can see where this is going. How did the end come about?
Yeah. So basically, we grind it out for another turn or 2. I have 3 Vanguards who prove to be unkillable, no matter how many sprays and random nonsense is thrown their way, and they just sit trying to clear the zones every turn, as McKay drives around shooting all her guns and killing everything in range. And I'm essentially able to clear the center zone and my right-hand zone, which is being protected by the Railless Interceptor. And then the game is sealed when I have enough attacks going to start to threaten Tomasz's objective, which is going to clear out the left zone and give me enough points to win.
Right. Okay, cool. So in the end, we ended up with a ClogCon repeat, which is Tomasz wins the Masters and Patrick wins the Invitational. We then went on to play a team tournament, which we're not going to discuss today, but that was also played, and we will hopefully cover that in part 3 of this, but that is for another time. So just before we close up, any final thoughts on that game, gents? Or have we covered everything that we wanted to say there? I know that I've got one more thing, which is that I lost 20 quid on this game. Because...
Yeah, I think the Brits did pretty well, didn't they?
Yeah, the Brits did fairly well on the side betting there because, now there's a couple of group chats that I'm involved in with the Knights team, and they're quite keen on giving people nicknames. And my nickname has been changed, without my consent, by the way, to Never Bet Against Pat. Because I made separate bets with several people on Tomasz, simply based on the fact that I didn't even get to watch the game. Normally, if I'm gambling, it's just because I like to watch the game and just like feel a bit of an extra rush. So I'll put money on anyone really. But in this case, I'd seen the Wormwood game the other day, and I was like, I'm not sure there's much you can do about that. That's just that level of stranglehold is not great, and I've got quite a bit of faith in Tomasz to kill people when given the chance. So yeah, I lost some coin on that one. Anyway, and earned a nickname, so that's annoying.
Sorry, bro.
Nice.
It's all right.
I mean, it was fair. Like, it was Pat's turn to win. Like, we agreed on it before the game. So.
Yeah, my only regret is that I didn't play this McKay list in the Masters final, which it was sitting as my off list, and I hadn't played it. And if I had, maybe I'd have won the Masters final. But then again, if I had dropped it in Masters and won with the surprise factor, maybe that would have been enough to give you the edge in the Invitational.
Yeah.
And it might have just swapped the results. So who knows?
And the question is, which one do you want more? Do you want the Masters or the Invitational? Like, you'd have to sit there and think about it. Like,
Yeah. Well, we had the conversation before ClockCon. I was asking Pat about if he prefers Invitational or Masters, because like everyone is a bit on the Invitational train. And I was saying that I think it's from United States, because the Invitational in US is a bit different than in Europe. In Europe, it's just top 8 from the weekend, and in United States, it's like you qualify from many different tournaments across the country, and then you meet in this one very important tournament. So yeah, Patrick said that he prefers Invitational. I preferred Masters. So yeah, everyone got what he wanted, right?
Perfect. So, as always, Pat, thank you very much for coming on and having a chat with us. It's been a pleasure. Just before we go, we didn't prepare for this, but I'm gonna just ask for each of us to give like a couple of sentences about the state of our faction. Just I'll go first so you get an idea what I'm talking about. So I'll cover Legion and you guys can cover yours. And it's just a little sort of what you currently think about your faction. And it's just your opinion, so it doesn't have to be true. People can always bash you for it later, and I'm sure they will. So in terms of Legion, I think we had a great run with Primal Terrors, and it is coming to an end because the meta as it currently stands is sort of mirroring what Primal Terrors does, and I think that leads a lot of lists to sort of have good game into us. But Callus 1 is keeping us in the game. So Callus 1 and his feet and the Rot Wings and stuff like that, they give us something of an all-comers list. And so we're sort of kept in the game by that. And I think we're one of those factions where everyone's looking for the off list. Someone's trying to find that magical off list that will solve our problems, which is guns. And so far, not getting there. So that's my feeling on Legion. Tomasz, how do you think Circle are doing? Where are Circle at?
Yeah, so I think that Circle is doing very good for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And now that we got Devour's Host, like we still have a very strong Bones of Ouroboros theme force, which is super versatile. And now we have like, I'm not a fan of power creep, but it's like super powerful theme force, which is also very versatile. So Circle can, like we presented in team tournament, we can do triple Circle team and do well. I really believe we could do 5 Circle team and do well as well. It's just how the faction is versatile now.
Right. I mean, I don't disagree with much of what you said there. And Pat, how's CG feeling?
Very exciting because it's new and unexplored. It's the kind of faction where I think pretty much everything is playable. Even it's really interesting to see people talk about Crucible Guard because people that play them have really strong opinions about which cast is the best, but pretty much everyone can't agree on who that is.
Uh-huh.
And although their model pool is quite small, they can make quite diverse and powerful lists in different ways. And they have, although they don't have necessarily, they're not super strong in every situation, they've got a good toolbox of answers, and they can tech for any kind of matchup. And I think McKay's ability to take on Wormwood is a good example of that, where I was able to kind of make a list with a plan in mind, and it worked out okay. So I think that basically they're new, they're unexplored, there's a lot of room to grow with them. I've got no idea if the lists I'm taking now are good, and if they'll still be lists I play a year from now, or if I'll have changed again completely. Which is kind of a fun place to be.
And I think it's very interesting that 12 hours before you won the Invitational, everyone was sort of almost like, oh, well, it's confirmed. Crucible Guard just died to Wormwood. And then, half a day later, you're like, nope.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's so exciting, right? I think, because I've had Wormwood written off as being almost unwinnable. And then beating it twice in a row on that day in a high level event against two good players shows that that's not the case, right? And if your worst matchup is beatable, then you've got game, right? You can play into an event and expect to do okay.
And that is exciting. All right, guys, thank you very much, and thank you all for listening. And we will hopefully get the chance to come back again with the for the third part, which would be the winning team of the team tournament, and discuss some of those games. But we can't guarantee it because obviously that's a lot of schedules that we'd need to line up. So, Pat, once again, thank you very much. Tomasz, pleasure as always. And so this is me signing off. If anyone else wants to, feel free. Good.
Thanks for listening.
Excellent. Let's leave that in. Don't edit that at all. That's great. Cheers, guys.
All right.
Cheers.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.